The 4th of November 1914, a British ship called Endurance set sail with 28 men. Their leader? Sir Ernest Shackleton. His goal was insane. To cross Antarctica. On foot. No GPS. No maps. No rescue plan. Just ice, snow, darkness, and 2,900 kilometers of the most dangerous land on Earth. If anything went wrong, there would be no help. No backup. No way home. But Shackleton didn't come to survive. He came to make history. What he didn't know was that within weeks, his ship would vanish into the ice, and his mission would turn into the most terrifying survival story the world has ever seen. Trapped in Antarctica. No radio. No food. No sunlight. And 522 days of hell ahead. The Endurance pressed forward deeper into the Weddell Sea. Locals had warned Shackleton. Don't go now. The ice is too thick. The weather is turning. He didn't listen. The ship pushed through the ice like a knife. But the sea was closing in tighter, colder, heavier. And then silence. December 1914, the ship stopped moving. Trapped. The ice had caught them. They tried everything. Engines at full speed. Men hacking with saws and axes. But the ship didn't budge. Days passed. Then weeks. Then the sun disappeared. In Antarctica's winter, there is no day. Only darkness. Temperatures dropped below -40 degrees Celsius. The ship groaned and creaked. As the ice squeezed tighter, Shackleton gave the order. We make camp. We wait. But the ice wasn't waiting. It was moving. Crushing. Slowly. Quietly. Like a predator stalking its prey. October 1915. The first cracks tore through the Endurance. A scream of wood. Water began pouring in. For 3 days and nights, the men fought with buckets and pumps. Hands frozen. Eyes red. Bodies shaking. But it was no use. The ship was dying. On October 27th, Shackleton stood on the ice, watching. Boom. A giant slab of ice struck the stern. The rear of the ship lifted 20 feet into the air. The hull snapped like a twig. The dream was over. Abandoned ship. The men grabbed what little they could. And watched as the Endurance, the ship that was supposed to carry them across a continent, sank beneath the ice. And with it, every plan they had. Now there was no turning back. No map. No help. Just 28 men stranded. On a frozen sea. The Endurance was gone. Swallowed by the ice. All that remained was 28 men. No ship. No radio. No sunlight. Just endless white and silence. They stood on a floating sheet of ice in the middle of the Antarctic Ocean. No land in sight. No one coming. This was not part of the plan. Shackleton gathered the men. They checked their supplies. 3 lifeboats. A sledge. Some personal items. And food. For 1 month. That's it. At night, most had to sleep directly on the ice. Their breath froze in midair. Fingers blackened. And as the weeks passed, the ice beneath them began to drift. Slowly. Quietly. Further and further from the land they had hoped to reach. They were no longer stranded. They were being carried. Into the heart of nowhere. Shackleton looked at his map. The nearest possible land? Paulet Island. 550 kilometers across a frozen sea. He had been there 12 years before. He had left rescue supplies there. For a future disaster. Now, that disaster was him. The crew packed their sledges. Each man was allowed only 2 pounds of belongings. Shackleton left behind his gold coins. Even his Bible. Nothing mattered more than survival. The dogs that had once kept them company were killed. There was no other food. After hours of pulling their lifeboats across softening ice, they looked back. They had moved only 1 mile. 1 mile. Shackleton knew, if they kept going, they'd die of exhaustion. So they stopped. Right there on the drifting ice. They called it Ocean Camp. A camp with no land. No anchor. Just a name. Floating in darkness. Ocean Camp floated in silence. But beneath that silence was death. The ice shifted at night. Deep cracks would split the camp without warning. A single step in the wrong direction could mean falling into freezing, black water. The wind screamed like a living thing. It clawed at their tents. It tore at their skin. Food ran lower each day. The men boiled seal meat, drank melted ice, and chewed on frozen penguin. Hunger gnawed at them like an invisible predator. But worse than hunger was the waiting. Weeks turned into months. The ice carried them further north. But not toward land. It was drifting toward the open sea. A place where the ice would break apart and they would be left floating in lifeboats. Thousands of kilometers from safety. Shackleton knew the truth. If they stayed too long, the ice would kill them. If they left too soon, the ocean would kill them. Every creak, every groan of the ice beneath their feet, was a reminder that time was running out. And then one night, the ice made its choice. A violent crack ripped through ocean camp. It sounded like cannon fire. Men stumbled from their tents, grabbing whatever they could. Through the darkness, they could see it. A jagged river of black water tearing their camp in two. The ice was breaking apart. Now, here. Shackleton shouted over the wind. Get to the boats. Move. This was no longer a waiting game. The frozen world they had called home for months was turning against them. And their next journey would be across a killing sea. Weeks passed at ocean camp. Every day colder. Every night quieter. The world had forgotten them. And the ice? It was no longer still. November 21st, 1915. A deep groan echoed under their feet. The wreck of the Endurance, still caught in the ice nearby, began to rise and fall. Slowly, then violently. And then, in front of their eyes, the ship was gone. Swallowed whole. The last trace of the outside world erased. Their floating camp drifted for months. Cold. Starving. Silent. The men hunted seals. Ate penguins. Melted chunks of ice on their skin just to drink a few drops. By March 1916, the ice beneath them had shrunk. What was once a floating island was now just a thin, cracking sheet. Shackleton stood silent. He knew what had to come next. Prepare the boats. Their lifeboats, 3 of them, were lowered into the freezing sea. Ahead of them 83 kilometers of deadly water, shifting ice, and unseen terror. Behind them nothing but broken ice and death. They climbed in. Wet, shaking, silent. One final push toward the nearest hope. Elephant Island. The sea roared. Icebergs crashed around them. The boats slammed into waves, nearly tipping. Salt water burned their faces. Their hands were purple. But they rowed. They rowed for their lives. Until April 15, 1916. Land. After 497 days at sea and on ice, they touched solid ground. Elephant Island. A cold, barren rock. No humans. No help. But it was land. And for a moment it felt like heaven. They had survived the sea. But now came the real question. Would they ever make it back home? Elephant Island gave them ground. But not hope. It was empty. Wind blasted. Forgotten by the world. No one lived here. No ships passed by. No help would ever come. Shackleton looked at his men, frostbitten, starving, exhausted. He knew. If they stayed, they'd die. There was only one chance left. He would go get help. Himself. With 5 others, he would cross the most dangerous sea on Earth. Drake Passage. 1,300 kilometers of hell. Towering waves. Freezing storms. Waters that had swallowed thousands of sailors before. All they had was a lifeboat. A 22-foot wooden boat. No cabin. No shelter. Just sails, oars, and courage. On April 24, 1916, they launched into the dark. Behind them, 22 men watched in silence. Shackleton was gone. And now, they waited. 4 days, the boat was hammered by storms. Waves slammed the deck. Salt water froze on their skin. They rowed in shifts, 4 hours rowing, 4 hours trying to sleep. In ice-soaked clothes, curled like animals, surrounded by vomit and cold. Every day, they drifted closer to death. They had no radio. No contact. If the boat flipped, no one would ever know what happened to them. The sun barely rose. Just a few hours of weak light each day, the only time they could check their direction. And then came the storm. A monster. Winds howled. Waves towered above them like cliffs. The boat was tossed like a toy. Everything inside soaked. 4 hours, they were sure the sea would bury them. And then the clouds broke. Land. Shackleton saw it. South Georgia Island. The place where this journey began. 522 days ago. He was only a few miles away. But he had nothing left. No strength. No words. Just a final whisper in his mind. Keep going. And he did. Shackleton had reached land. South Georgia Island. But he was on the wrong side. Between him and help stood mountains. 10,000-foot peaks. Covered in snow. Pierced by glacier. No one, not a single soul, had ever crossed them. Locals said it was suicide. But Shackleton had no choice. The lifeboat was too damaged to sail. His men were dying. And time was running out. So he climbed. No map. No ropes. No food to spare. No sleeping bags. Just 2 men at his side, Worsley and Crean. And a prayer. They left at 3 a.m. Faces frozen. Legs shaking. They climbed through darkness, ice, and silence. Over one peak. A dead end. Over another. A sheer drop. Time after time, the mountain pushed them back. For 36 hours, they didn't stop. No sleep. No rest. Just snow in their boots and wind in their bones. They were out of strength. Out of hope. Then the fog lifted. Far below. They saw something moving. Smoke. A chimney. A station. People. After 522 days, Shackleton had found life again. He staggered into the whaling station. His face unrecognizable. Beard down to his chest. Clothes in rags. The men at the station froze in shock. Shackleton's mission failed. He never walked across Antarctica. But he walked into legend. 522 days of ice, sea, storms, starvation. And he brought every man back alive. Not one death. Not one left behind. It wasn't just survival. It was something deeper. Leadership. Sacrifice. Unbreakable will. A century passed. And then, in 2022, scientists searching the deep Weddell Sea found something. 10,000 feet beneath the ice. The Endurance. Perfectly preserved. As if the sea had remembered. The wooden nameplate still intact. The ship frozen in time just like the moment it was lost. A ghost from 1915, rising from the dark. And now, if you ever find yourself on South Georgia Island, walk to the windswept cemetery by the shore. There you'll find a simple grave. A quiet stone. A name carved into it. Sir Ernest Shackleton. The man who failed his mission. But saved every soul. And proved to the world that courage isn't about reaching the goal. Sometimes. It's about bringing your people home. They had heard the stories. The man who vanished in Antarctica. Now he stood at their door. Alive. But Shackleton didn't ask for food. Or warmth. Or rest. He asked for a ship. Because 22 of his men were still waiting. Still surviving. Still believing that their captain was coming back. Shackleton had made it. But the fight wasn't over. 22 of his men were still stranded on Elephant Island. Waiting, hoping, freezing. He tried to reach them once. The ship hit ice. Tried again. Ice. A third time. Ice. Every failed attempt was a dagger to the heart. Shackleton couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Somewhere out there his men were still alive. Or maybe they weren't. Then came a fourth chance. A Chilean ship, Yelcho. Small. No heating. No radio. But it could break the ice. Shackleton took it. No hesitation. August 30th, 1916. The Yelcho reached Elephant Island. Shackleton stood at the bow, eyes locked on the shore. And then movement. A figure on the rocks. A flare. They were alive. All 22. Waiting. Watching. And then they saw him. The boss is back. After 128 days on that island. After 522 days of ice, sea, hunger, and darkness. Not one man had died. Because every single morning, Frank Wild, Shackleton's second-in-command, had climbed a hill and said the same thing. Pack your bags, boys. The boss might come today. For 4 months, he said it. And on the 129th day, the boss came. The men wept. Some collapsed. Others just stood still, unable to believe they were going home. Shackleton had left England with 27 men. He returned. With all 27. Not a single life lost. No medals. No conquest. Just one of the greatest stories of leadership, courage, and survival the world has ever seen. And today, more than a century later, if you walk the cold shore of South Georgia Island, you'll find a grave. Carved into the stone, just one name. Sir Ernest Shackleton. He never crossed Antarctica. But what he did was far greater.